At their September 2018 event, Apple unveiled new versions of the Apple Watch and iPhone, including a new lower-cost LCD-based iPhone X. But were the new devices enough to convince business pros to ditch their old devices and upgrade? For Tech Republic and ZDNet, I'm Bill Detwiler, and here to provide his insights on this question is Jason Hiner, Global Editor-in-Chief of Tech Republic and Global Long-Form Editor of ZDNet. So Jason, what did Apple announce about the new iPhone XS, not the XS, that business pros will care about?
Yeah, when you say iPhone XS, iPhone XS, all I think is in excess, you know.
Me too. That's all I think about too.
So they announced the iPhone XS and the XS Max. So the XS Max is the same size as last year's 8 Plus, but with that edge-to-edge screen. So it's a monster. And then, of course, they announced the XR as well, which is the lower-priced version with an LCD screen. But it has a lot of the same features, and certainly a lot of businesses are going to want to think about that one pretty seriously because it has a lot of the same capabilities that the larger devices have. But the real thing about these larger devices, that XS Max has a 6.5-inch screen. So it is going to have a lot more real estate for business professionals, people who care about productivity. There's a lot more workable, usable space on there. I'm sure a lot of those users who want the latest and the greatest, that's going to be their favorite device. It also has, the nerdiest thing about it is the new A12 Bionic processor, which says it can manage an upgrade from 600 billion processes per second in last year's model to 5 trillion processes per second in this model. So where that matters is things like machine learning, so AR capabilities, which these devices are trying to play up. And then, of course, it says it's also going to do app speed. So app speed is supposedly 30% faster in launching.
So when you open and close your apps, it'll be faster.
And in running some of the high-powered apps as well. And then also in the camera. So it's taking a Note similar to what we heard from Samsung in the Note 9. It's taking a note out of Samsung's book.
A note from the Note, okay.
Exactly, where they are using software to help make your photos better. And Apple's kind of always done this, but what it's doing is it's saying it takes that image signal processor with its neural engine, which is really the software that powers a lot of machine learning, a lot of data-driven, to figure out what kind of picture you're trying to take, and then it's going to use the software to help make that picture better. So in dark areas, in knowing whether you're doing a close-up, of course in its very sort of bokeh-driven photos where the background is blurry and puts the focus on the subject, so for portraits in its portrait mode. And it says it's doing what it calls smart HDR. So it'll take up to 4 pictures every time you take a photo in that mode, and it will combine those pictures. So it'll take one long exposure, it'll take one sort of short exposure, and it'll try to fill in some of those shadows. It'll try to make that photo look really great without you having to do anything, change any settings or anything like that. So that's where we're going to see some of that power show up. People that really care about photography and use these as their primary cameras will, of course, love that. And we did hear from Apple that more and more professionals are adopting these, and they pointed to the fact that Time Magazine, for the first time, used an iPhone photo for its cover photo, which no one knew about until they announced it in this, as far as we know. So it's a big deal. So
pretty soon we'll be filming all our ZDNet and Tech Republic videos on an iPhone, right?
I mean, we did joke about that even before this started. You never know. You never know. So it's getting much, much better.
Right.
That has a big impact. Again, though, that's really focused around the XS and the XS Max, which have that dual camera. The XR, which is $750, so
that's going to be the lower cost version of the 10.
That has the LCD. That one still, it has only one camera, but it still has a lot of that same functionality built into it. And when you saw the photos that they showed, the examples that they showed in the keynote, it was hard to tell the difference between those XR photos and the 10s and the 10s Max. So I think you're going to see a lot of people go for those. Also, they kind of have some nicer finishes. They have more colors, and the colors, especially like the red and the blue one, it's red and blue all the way around the edges and the bezels and everything. And so they look really, really sharp. I think you're going to see a lot of people, and especially businesses, if they're handing out devices, they're going to really consider, those, because you're saving $250 per device when you add it up and you're handing out hundreds or thousands of these. It makes a difference.
So let's talk about pricing for a little bit here. We have the lower cost iPhone XR, and then we have the regular iPhone XS, and it's all its different variations. Now, what I thought was really interesting is the top-end iPhone XS Max, right? So as expensive as you can get, we're pushing $1,500 here, right?
Well, $1,099 is the
well, for the
price.
512, like I don't really see anyone buy it. Look, if you're dropping $1,100 on a phone, right?
You're gonna upgrade.
Why are you going to get a 64 gig phone? You're just going to go with the 512. I mean, you're just going to go all in. So if you're all in around what, $1,500, right?
It's probably going to be $10.99, then $12.99, then $14.99 for the big one.
So you're talking
$12.99 for 256.
Right.
Probably $14.99.
So we're talking $1,500. So it seems to me that, as Apple sees, you and I have talked about their shift from Macs a lot into iPhone. This isn't just this year, but as they move to their profits being made from their mobile devices, more so than their laptops and their desktops certainly, it seems like they're just replacing the cost of a Mac with an iPhone, right? You can now buy a Mac for less than you can an iPhone.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, that $14.99, their top end iPhone XS Max with the half a terabyte of storage at $14.99. That is more expensive than a laptop. It's pretty amazing. The thing is, you replace your laptop every 3 to 4 years, sometimes 5 years, now. Whereas these phones, you're typically replacing on this 2 to 3 year upgrade cycle. You're seeing more people try to hold on to them longer. So, maybe we get to that 4 to 5 year replacement cycle being similar when you're paying this much for one of these devices. Also, the carriers aren't subsidizing them the way they used to, so you're typically leasing or paying, for all of that up front.
And Apple mentioned that during the call. I thought that was really interesting. There was a segment of the call where they talked about their recycling efforts, the manufacturing efforts that they're going through to use recycled components, recycled tin in their main system boards, recycled plastics or a certain percentage of recycled plastics in some of the components inside the phone. They talked about their programs to allow you to turn in your old iPhones. Now you've seen them mention that a little bit in the past at other events, but this year seemed a little different because they were pushing that we know these devices are expensive, but we expect you to keep them longer message. And that seemed a little new to me. You didn't see, it's odd to see a device manufacturer telling people it's okay if you don't upgrade every year. It's at all these events, it's usually very rah-rah, it's very engineered obsolescence. We want you to buy the newest and the greatest every single year. And there seems to be a bit of an acknowledgement now that because these devices are so expensive, because they are computer replacements, that it has become a little unrealistic for Apple to expect everyone to buy a brand new top-tier iPhone every year.
I think you're right, and I think that the market, though, has gotten so big, right? They sell so many of these, they have so many customers, that now they can bet on the fact that you're probably going to buy one every other year. So they're going to, there's enough people on upgrade cycle, it's kind of staggered that they're like, okay, we're selling you on one if this is your sort of upgrade kind of year.
And still satisfy Wall Street.
They can still make enough profit on that. They make a very good profit margin on these devices. They sell such a large volume of them, and there's still there are roughly 4 billion people in the world in 2018 that have smartphones. By 2022, that's expected to be 6 billion. So that market is going to grow by 50% just over the next few years. So you figure if they can grab, like they do, the most valuable, skim off the most valuable chunk of that off the top, it's a lot more iPhones for them to sell.
All right, let's switch gears and let's talk a little bit about the Apple Watch, the other main event here at the show. What, from your perspective, what upgrades in the Apple Watch did we see that are important for business professionals or businesses themselves?
Yeah, we know that a lot of the people who are buying the Apple Watch are professionals, right? They're people that are getting of a certain age, or are professionals and coming into some disposable income if they're younger people, and they like a device like that, like the Apple Watch, that is a bit of a fashion accessory, but they also really like it for its fitness capabilities. When it first came out, and I've said this many times, but it was often talked about like it's a computer on your wrist. It's really not that. It's just a slightly smarter Fitbit. And Fitbit and others are now getting closer, right, with the Versa. Samsung just came out with a new watch of its own. These devices are getting closer to the Apple Watch, but it is still the gold standard, it's still the best selling of the smartwatches. And Apple's found its niche in two things: fitness and healthcare. And fitness, it does a great job of serving that market, runners, although a lot of hardcore runners still like things like GPS watches, Garmin, and that kind of thing. But for the a little bit more casual runner, of which there's a lot more of them, it does pretty well with them, as well as other people that care about fitness. And now they're finally doing the thing that I said would be great before they even launched watches. They're making it so that you can go into your gym and you can just tap your Apple Watch on it, and it'll record your workout off of that machine, if you go into a different gym. So they're working and doing more things for fitness, but healthcare is where they're really making a big bet. And this one had some really powerful things that they announced. One is it will now, both with the new hardware that they announced and their software that they're doing, it will detect falls. So if you fall, it can automatically dial emergency services, for example. That's a big deal, as we know, for people that
especially for people who have elderly relatives, or if they are prone to falls themselves. That can be a big, those fall risks are a real danger. And so it's important to have a system that allows you to detect that. And if this can do that and alert somebody, that could be a key selling point.
Yep, that's a powerful thing. So, and obviously that's a much different market than sort of the younger, middle-aged exercise kind of fitness folks. The other thing that is a bit of a breakthrough with this, we'd heard some rumors of it, the new Apple Watch will actually take an ECG, an electrocardiogram. That is pretty significant. You would have to go into a healthcare provider to get something like this done. It takes about 30 seconds. It's not automatic. It can do some automatic heart detection in the background. Can detect some
a low heart rate we saw. It can also detect, they were talking about AFib. And as someone who has had a relative that has gone through these events before, it would have been really helpful to have a device that was monitoring that heart rate over time and do early detection of these conditions, because what you find is even if you're going in to see a cardiologist, if you're going in to see your GP once a month or once a year or every 6 months, whatever it is, you may not be having the condition, the condition may not be manifesting itself during that visit. So whereas you may go in and out of, say, AFib, or you may have a low heart rate that comes back up at the time when you're standing or when you're at the doctor's office. So having a device that can that can detect these conditions continuously and then show your doctor, oh, for the last 6 months, you've been in and out of AFib for this. Previously, like you said, you're only able to detect that with devices like a pacemaker. Or an implantable defibrillator, right?
In some kind of very expensive experiment or challenge, and response kind of methodology where you have to go to a healthcare provider. They're like, great, we're going to send somebody out to monitor you for the day, or we're going to put you in a lab, and we're going to, monitor, how this goes for a certain amount of time. Very expensive, also limited in time. So this kind of thing is pretty significant. They did announce some other sort of technology things. The screen itself is much larger. It goes more edge to edge. So because of that, it has more complications on the watch face, other more basically things that you can put on up from, 6 up to 8 or even 9 on there. So you can more customize the data that's on your watch. So things like that, because it has that little bit larger screen in the same form factor, although it is actually a little bit slimmer. So one of the arguments against the device is it's not the best looking device. It's a little chunky for what it is. I'm sure over time, of course, technology gets smaller and more powerful, but they are making some small strides there. Also, the big red button is no longer big and standing out, but it's more like a red circle. They announced some haptic feedback on some of those buttons, so some small tweaks and improvements that make usability better, make it a little smaller, the design better. So those things were there as well, but the big upgrades is that healthcare stuff. That is significant.
Okay. Well, those are great insights. For all our Apple news and analysis, be sure to check out ZDNet. And for all our how-tos and Mac tips, check out Tech Republic, and be sure to subscribe to our Apple in the Enterprise newsletter.